Welcome, everyone. Really appreciate taking the time to meet with us this afternoon to talk about CMMC compliance, some of the paths to get there, and some recommendations that we have, what PreVeil can offer for you. I'm Vince Petrecca. I head up the sales and customer success teams at PreVeil. Been here about 7 years and have been pretty steeped in this CMMC business for at least 5 or 6 of those. So looking forward to sharing what we can with you to help your journey down the CMMC path go more smoothly. And with me is...
Hi there. I'm Noelle Vestal. I'm the Chief Compliance Officer here at PreVeil. And just like Vince, I kind of got thrown into compliance because of the job I had previously. So I've actually implemented the 110 controls at the last company I was at. And now I help everybody, all of our PreVeil customers, get compliant themselves.
Exactly. And how about your certifications, Noelle?
Yes, I'm a certified CMMC assessor and a certified CMMC professional. I'm glad you're remembering my stuff, Vince.
It's okay. That's okay. Good to have you on because I'm not either of those yet. But okay. So the title here is Cut Costs, Not Corners. The 110 controls, NIST CMMC controls to be fully compliant with the duty requirements is stringent. And there really aren't. You can't cut corners and get there, quite frankly. But there are ways to do this in a more streamlined, more cost-effective manner. And we've proven that at PreVeil with our customer base. So I want to take you through some of that. And we're really going to do a deep dive. In fact, Noelle is going to take you through a deep dive on our compliance accelerator, which is a very unique tool, unlike any other in the industry, that will help streamline and speed your path through CMMC compliance. So here's our agenda for today. I'm going to pass it over to Noelle to give you an update on the latest CMMC timeline. We'll discuss a few of the high-level challenges associated with achieving CMMC compliance and maintaining it. I'll then take you through some high-level information on protecting CY with PreVeil's technology platform and our overall solution. And then we'll pass it over to Noelle for her 10 steps to CMMC compliance accelerator walkthrough. After that, I'll just give you a quick update on PreVeil's really powerful preferred partner network that we'll share with you as a customer PreVeil's, and then we'll get into Q&A. So if you have questions, please put them into Q&A at any time, and we'll get to those after we get through with this. This should take hopefully less than 30 minutes, and then we'll move on to your questions and answers and cover any that you have before we wrap up today. All right, Noelle, why don't you give us the latest story on the CMMC timeline?
Absolutely. So you're going to see a whole lot of different colored boxes on this little timeline here. The orange ones that are on the left are things that have already happened. And then the blue boxes on the right are estimates of when we think things are going to be happening. So on the left-hand side, for those of you who aren't aware, the 32 CFR, which is the CMMC final rule, was published back in December of 2024. So it's been out for a few months now. But we are not technically in the first phased rollout of CMMC quite yet, because we are waiting on, you'll see on these little blue boxes on the right, something called Title 48 rule, or CFR 48. So when that comes out, we are anticipating that it's going to come out sometime in the next couple of months. We obviously don't know because the DoD is going to decide when that comes out. When that comes out, CFR 48, it'll have a 60-day review period like pretty much every rule does in the federal government. And after that 60-day review period, you'll have an effective date. And that's when phase 1 rollouts start for CMMC, and phase 2 and phase 3, etc. I love this quote at the bottom here. For any of you who were thinking that CMMC was going to be going away, Katie Arrington is the founder of the CMMC program, and she is the DoD CIO and has made it very clear that CMMC is not going away. We are not pausing. Currently, the issue that we're having the CFR 48 coming out is there's just some regulatory hurdles that they have to get through internally. But once that comes out and we have that effective date, we're off to the races. So this is coming very soon, and it's very good to be aware of that. In fact, we've even seen a lot of customers have even seen in requests for proposals, requests for information from the government, from primes, from all kinds of different people. These contracts already have the stipulation and requirement. In fact, there was a large BPA, which a blanket purchase agreement. It's a 10-year deal. Everyone who's going to be a part of that has to be CMMC. So it's even though we haven't started the phases yet, it's still coming down the pipe pretty quickly.
Yeah, this is rolling out even ahead of CFR 48, and we're seeing a lot of demand for pushing forward with the compliance with making sure that SPRS scores are entered, supplier risk management scores are entered, and the self-attestation versus the 110 controls. Doesn't mean you have to be at 110 to do that. That's just one of the steps along the way. But certainly, with a solution, like PreVeil in place and working on your controls, you can have a much stronger SPRS score, be a better position to bid on contracts here in 2025. And Noel, just to clarify, you were saying orange versus blue, but the blue box on the left has occurred. I mean, that obviously happened at the end of the year, so we maybe
Indeed.
change that to orange next time.
Yeah, maybe we need to move this over a little bit. We've been using it for the
But
same thing.
C3PO assessments have started. Last year, they were joint surveillance voluntary assessments between the DIBCAC audit team and C3POs. Now it is just C3POs, and that's valuable. And PreVeil has had many customers go through JSVA successfully, and has now had customers go through C3PO assessments successfully as well.
In fact, as of this week, it is 20 customers that we have that have successfully gone through with 110 of 110 between the JSVAs and CMMC. And we also have, I believe, 4 now C3PAOs who have gone through assessments using PreVeil as well. So yeah, definitely good to know. And remember too, this is all for CMMC. If you have a DFAR 7012 clause, this is already required of you. You're already supposed to be adhering to NIST 800-171. And just so everybody is very clear on this call, that is already the legal requirement. So the DoD, the DIBCAC, which is the Defense Industrial Base, assessment branch, they are still doing assessments of people. So, random assessments. So it's good to know, although this is great to know for the CMMC timeline, it's still a responsibility and contractual obligation now for most people.
Yeah, in fact, we're seeing several of our customers at any time being involved in this 800-171 DIBCAC audit. So you never know when your number is going to get pulled for that. And it's better to be prepared than not.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. Thanks, Noel. So some of the challenges that you'll face as you go through the planning phase for CMMC and looking to do this in the right manner. So just complexity, right? There are complexities involved in the CMMC process, as you probably already identified. And part of that is what I call simply the complexity of volume. There are 110 cyber controls that need to be met here. That's a big number. If there was only 1 or 10 controls, I think there'd be a lot less mystery around all this. But there's 110, and in fact, that gets broken down into 320 separate compliance objectives that you need to meet and be prepared to discuss during your assessment. So a big part of the complexity here is the law of large numbers. And what you need is partners in this journey that can help you whittle that down to size. There's the actual protection of the CY and ITAR, right? You need to have a DFAR 7012 compliant platform that you can store your files in, that you can manage and share them in, that you can send emails, that based on that solution and store them based on that level of protection. That's table stakes for CUI compliance. You have to meet those DFARS controls. If you're using a cloud service provider, they must meet the appropriate FedRAMP requirements. They must meet the appropriate DFAR 7012 clauses C through G requirements. And that would be media reporting, incident response, and media preservation. So that's got to be there as well. So obviously you get those with PreVeil in the AWS GovCloud. We provide for that. Not all cloud services providers do that. For instance, standard Google Workspace, Microsoft Office 365 do not. So that's why PreVeil positions ourselves to complement those quite easily. Cost. This can get expensive quickly. There's a platform that you need to work with here. You will probably at some point need some advising or consulting resources to help you with some of the more challenging portions of the CMMC journey. And then at the end, you will need a CMMC assessment, and that will be from a certified C3PAO. So you need to consider, and we'll talk about how you can reduce costs in all of those areas as you go through the process. Or especially for small and medium businesses, this can become a significant item. So we look, I know at PreVeil, we look every day and figure, how can we make this less expensive for our customers, less of a burden? Okay, the fourth is documentation. Don't underestimate the requirement around the documentation here. This is at best hundreds of pages and possibly over 1,000 pages of documentation between your system security plan, your standard operating procedures that support that, and your artifacts where you maintain the proof that you're actually doing what you say that you do. So it's a lot of content. So you want partners in here that are going to help you with pre-created content that's already there. So you don't have to create it all from scratch, and preferably content that you know is proven to be successful in assessments. So that's something you want as well. Save you a lot of time, agony. And then finally, you need to take a look ahead to what I call sustainable compliance. This isn't just a one-year thing. This isn't a one and done. I got my 110 and I'm all set. I just keep that piece of paper. Unfortunately, you're going to have to self-attest every year going forward, and every 3 years get another C3PAO assessment. You're going to have to maintain this compliance for the long term. So when you make decisions about what platform or what solution to go with, you have to think about the long-term costs and complexities associated with that, not just the initial. We see many folks come to us every day who've gone down other routes saying, wow, we need to find a less expensive, less time-consuming approach to managing our CMMC compliance. One specifically I want to mention that's now getting a little more press, there's a little more buzz about it, is VDI implementations for CMMC. So virtual desktop, instantiations of your platform. So basically it's like having a separate laptop that's operating in the cloud somewhere that's you're going to keep and manage all your CY content on. There are pros and cons to this approach. The biggest cons, I would say, if you're thinking about a virtual desktop, would be just the cost. It's significantly more expensive to operate a VDI. Second would be lack of business flexibility. When you're operating in that virtualized environment, it kind of restricts a lot what you can do with that content, and it may not fit your business process. And third would be performance. When you're operating at a distance, everything's operating at a distance, and you're using someone else's compute resources, you don't know what kind of performance you're going to get sometimes. It may not be as steady as you need it to be. You may not be able to get done what you need to get done quickly enough. So those are things to look at. On the pro side to a VDI, and PreVeil operates for many customers inside virtual desktop environments. And we have a couple partners that have excellent solutions where they provide VDI offerings with PreVeil in them, is that it minimizes a bit the extent that you need to be working with individual endpoint controls and managing the endpoint controls on individual devices for users. You're kind of centralizing those endpoint controls out in that VDI environment. And sometimes those VDI environments enable you to really meet more of the controls more succinctly or concisely, because they've centralized some of those in one place as opposed to those being across your multiple users out in the group. So just as an example, but if you have more questions about that, please let PreVeil know. We've got a compliance team that has a lot of expertise in virtual desktop environments, how PreVeil works in it, how other solutions work in it, and the pros and cons of using PreVeil in a VDI versus PreVeil in a standard configuration. So just a quick summary of what PreVeil, you may already be familiar with this, so I'll go very fast, but PreVeil is a secure, cost-effective solution to provide all your email, file storage, and sharing requirements for managing CUI. We meet all the DoD requirements associated with DFAR 7012, and it provides a solution that enables you to meet all 110 of the NIST CMMC controls. In fact, you're going to get primarily inherited or partial support for 102 of those 110 controls when you deploy and use PreVeil. Noel is going to go into detail on this middle section of the slide, which is the pre-filled CMMC NIST documentation, the one-on-one support we provide from our compliance team, all wrapped up in a very sophisticated compliance accelerator, which makes this whole process more digestible for you and helps you, speed your way through it as much as possible. And then finally, at the end, I'll just tell you a little bit more about PreVeil's partner community, having a set of vetted, approved, proven consulting partners, the RPO, registered practitioners, and the assessors, C3POs, as well as managed service providers that know how to provide support in this area, will again make your path much more faster, easier, and more effective in the long run. PreVeil's model is that your users can keep doing what they do with your productivity system. If you use Microsoft Office 365, keep using it. You want to use Outlook for email? No problem. PreVeil integrates with your Outlook email. PreVeil can operate in a browser on any desktop that your employees use. PreVeil Drive, same thing, operates in the browser view, or optionally can work in File Explorer. So you can sync any or all or none of your PreVeil folders into File Explorer, work on them on that device, and we'll save all of the content fully encrypted, meeting the compliance requirements in the AWS GovCloud. Oh, here's the part where I get to turn it over to you for a little while, Noel. Go ahead and give us, I think you've got 2 slides here and then the demo.
Okay, sounds great. So thanks, Vince. This is just a quick overview of the 10 steps to compliance. This is our compliance accelerator, like Vince was talking about. So it's pre-filled documentation, but we've taken all the documentation you'll see on the right-hand side. That's the system security planner, POEM template, standard operating procedures. But we've created them for a company as if that company was going to go through an assessment. So instead of just having it be a template where it's, hey, fill out this and there's no guidance whatsoever, there's actual guidance in all of these documents as to what you need to actually do. So we then put it all into this wonderful learning management system that you see on the left-hand side that I'm going to walk through in a minute and walk through all of the different steps that we have. We also have just a mountain of documentation in here. So here you go. Preliminary step, obviously, is you want to have a place to store your CUI. So we would prefer that you use PreVeil, of course, to do that. But any DFARS compliant platform would work just fine. Step 1 is always the step that we do first. I'm going to double tap sort of on that when we go into the accelerator. Gaining some expertise or understanding of NIST 171. How are you going to implement any of this stuff if you don't understand it? And step 3, conducting a self-assessment, which is something you have to do for SPRS anyway. So that's nice, checking that box. And then identify your gaps. What kind of POEMs do you need? And POEMs, if you're not familiar, is a plan of action and milestone. Then execute that plan. Hey, where are our gaps? Okay, how do we fill them? And then documenting your entire system. So this is all the documentation piece that we're going to go into. And I will be double clicking on that quite a bit because there's so much stuff in there. Vince put it really well. Documentation is it's the sleeper. A lot of people think like, oh, this won't be that bad. It'll be fine. It's not. It is so much more documentation than you think it is. It's more than just the SSP. It's so much other stuff as well. Then after you get your documentation done, you update those POEMs and any other documentation you need to update because of the updates you made to the POEMs. Obviously your documentation has to be updated to reflect that. And then have another assessment of yourself. Am I ready for an assessment? Do I feel like I am? And then optionally get a gap assessment by a third party. Can't recommend this enough. You always want somebody to come in and do a double check of what you did, even if you think you did everything perfectly. And I can tell you from experience, when I did this, I was like, oh yeah, I've got everything fine. Had somebody come in and did a third party assessment, found like 10 things that I had totally missed. So even somebody who's seasoned at this and knows what they're doing, I'm an IT professional, can still miss things. So that's very important to do. And then you schedule your assessment with your C3PAO assessor. And then, like Vince said, that's not the end. That's just the beginning.
But just wanted to point out as well, Noel, that in this pre-filled content is already all of the connections to PreVeil. So all of the detailed verbiage, essentially, that you need in the SSP and those standard operating procedures that would be related to your use of PreVeil, the admin's use of PreVeil, the features they're using, the logging that they're doing, the users and how to use the system and how they need to be authenticated and all that. That's already incorporated here, customized into the documentation. So that saves you a ton of time from trying to do that piece of it from scratch. And then Noel and her team have wrapped around that all of the non-PreVeil content that's still required for your path and for your assessment based on a sample company. That is like a typical type of company that we work with here at PreVeil. So the closer you are to our typical company, the easier this is going to be because you'll be able to use more and more of the content that we've created. But even if you're not just like that, we can provide guidance for what additional you will need to do to get down that path.
Absolutely. And like Vince said earlier too, this, we don't just send you into this and then go, okay, bye, good luck. Hope you figure everything out. You can always reach back out to me and to my team and get more help about any of this stuff. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the accelerator. This part right here is the accelerator. This is actually another thing unrelated. So you'll see that there are a couple different steps that are 00. These are actually because customers asked for them, quite frankly. So we are constantly updating this learning management system, these steps, to include different information that all of our customers need. there were so many customers who weren't really sure how subcontractors work with primes when it comes to compliance, or how do I secure my endpoint? That is one that we get all the time. What am I supposed to do with my endpoint? I do want to just take a quick moment with this one and look at it, because this is one of our brand new courses that we just added to the LMS. So we actually have a step-by-step guide. When we were just talking about, for example, when Vince was talking about whatever productivity suite you're using right now, if you're using Microsoft, this is already here for you, ready to go. It tells you all the things you need to do on that endpoint. An endpoint is a laptop, desktop, server, whatever it is that you're accessing CUI on. And then it also gives you the controls. And then on top of that, you've got how to actually install this stuff, and not just like, okay, here, go to this article, but this is exactly how you do it. Here are all of your steps, piece by piece. And there's also visuals to show you what you need to do, because, not all of us know how to update data loss prevention tools in a Microsoft instance. So this has been an incredibly valuable piece of information that our customers have just absolutely loved so far. So I did want to just really quickly touch on that point. But now let's go into the actual 10 steps, which are right down here. So what we were talking about before, step 1, this is the most important step you will ever take in your compliance boundary or in your compliance journey. I cannot say that enough. You need to be sure where all of your CUI is going, right? Scoping your boundary essentially is that. Where does CUI come in? Who interacts with it? How does it leave? So for all of these different courses, you'll see kind of similar content. There'll be a video with me explaining everything that we talk about in this step. There'll be a document that is associated with it. And this document will actually go through all the steps. It'll also give you an estimated level of effort for how many hours those steps could take you. Granted, this is estimated and based on your own opinion of your company. Are you a high level of effort, medium, or low? But then you actually get those little estimates on each section. So this is scoping your boundary. As you can see, this is a pretty involved process because it is so important for what you're doing. But all of these different questions, all these different areas to look at, they're already here for you. You don't have to think about, well, how am I going to scope my boundary? I don't even know where to start. This will walk you through all of that. And on top of it, it also has some additional information on what a CUI flow diagram could look like. This is an extremely simple one from our example company, but absolutely something that you can use. So scoping your boundary is obviously the most important step, but there are, of course, a whole lot of other ones. So we're going to skip down to documentation on step 6, just because this is, quite frankly, the bear out of everything. So documentation, you'll see the same setup. We've got a video. The slides that I use are here as well. Document overviewing everything. You'll also see our shared responsibility matrix and our system security plan. So our system security plan is written for all 110 controls. Here's a good example of one of the controls that we at PreVeil do not cover. You'll see this is controlling information posted or processed on publicly accessible systems. Is this stuff like making sure you don't post FCI or CUI on your Facebook page or LinkedIn or anything that people can publicly access. So even though this has nothing to do with PreVeil, you'll see that there's boilerplate language already set right here that you can use as is. We also have identified which objectives are being addressed, and everything here in bold and in brackets, that's a reference for, the user, for you to say, as you see here, insert the location of the access control procedure docs. There's also going to be just little information about PreVeil. And then even though we do nothing to cover this, this is an entire example process that you can use to address this control. And again, down to the objective level, everything that needs to be done, and walks you through everything, even though this is out of scope for PreVeil. So, and to Vince's point, everything that does have PreVeil, for example, here you go, PreVeil user responsibility already entered for you. Administrator information already entered for you. You don't have to do those parts. We've already done them for you. So you can read through this and be like, okay, great. Yep, that sounds good to me. You can change anything if there is something you're doing differently, but otherwise you're ready to go. So that is a huge advantage, is that this is a system security plan that's actually kind of filled out for you a bit. We usually say about 50 or 60% of the way, which is a huge advantage when you're going through so much documentation. So then we have a whole bunch of videos here that are educational. We had interviews with C3PAOs in there, but I'm going to jump down to this. This is our procedural documentation, and you'll see there are quite a few of them. I think we're up to something like 70 something at this point. There's quite a bit. You'll notice that they're all done by family. So this is access control, and it's not just one file. For access control alone, there are 5 different files that are associated with access control outside of the system security plan for this company. So we have a standard operating procedure. This is just our example company. Small company has 2 remote users, 5 people at headquarters that need to access CUI. Everybody else is a staff augmentation. We do have 1 storage cabinet full of CUI. That's it, physical CUI, and then everything digital CUI and FCI is going to be on PreVeil. And it goes down to an extreme detail on all of these. You can use this right as is. Obviously, you probably don't have Jane Doe and or John Doe and Jane Smith at your company, but maybe you do. Maybe they're doing this. I don't know. But obviously, those things have to be updated. I doubt that this is your address of your headquarters, and I'm pretty sure that hr@company.com is not your HR's email. But if they are, great, then you're already ready to go. So as you can see, I know I'm teasing, but as you can see, there's some things you do need to update. But for the most part, everything is here. Every single one of these different things. For example, posting of publicly posted information. We were just looking at that. Here is a more robust version of that same example that we had there. Controlling CUI flow is massive as part of all of the different controls in ISTIA 171. We have everything here, CUI spillage and CUI, if there's an incident where you inadvertently send it to somebody who wasn't supposed to see it, that entire process is all here for you, already written. You don't have to worry about it. Again, got to update some things here and there, but the bulk of it is already done for you. And what's really nice, and I apologize, I'm not trying to make anybody dizzy, I swear. But at the very end, such a long document. At the very end, you also have a signature page, and this is for all of our standard operating procedure documents. This one is for access control, but we have one for every one of the 14 families. You can actually use this as as you see here, by signing this letter annually to validate my continued commitment. This can be used as part of your awareness and training as well. So this is a really super easy way. One of the awareness and training controls talks about making people aware of their responsibilities and their roles. This is a great, easy, super easy way to do that. And we have, again, for every one of the different control families, you have that. But you'll also see some other additional information and additional files here as well. Like, for example, a CUI spillage after action report. That's something that a lot of companies wouldn't think that they would need, but this is a piece of documentation that's important as part of that CUI control flow process. We also have a lot of things that we've added because customers have just asked for them. CMMC introduction video. One of our customers said, hey, what about all of our other employees who aren't going to be accessing CUI? I want them to be aware of what's going on. Do you have a quick video we could do? So we made one. Hey, I'm a prime and I need to have a compliance questionnaire for my subcontractors that isn't confusing. It isn't like 40 pages long, which unfortunately most of them are. Hey, no problem. So we whipped one together and we have customers who are using this right now with their subcontractors. So my point being with all of this is that we are constantly evolving and constantly growing and constantly making this better and easier to understand and honestly just more helpful. So aside from that, I'll just jump really quick here. Aside from that, there's also our additional compliance resources. And you'll see when we were talking about, having a conversation with somebody like me, this is what all of our customers have access to who have the accelerator. You just find some time. Obviously, it's the end of the month, so we don't have anything right now, but you find some time with us, 30-minute calls, and we're happy to talk through any and all of these different things and any compliance questions that you have. So you won't feel like you're totally alone on this. And Vince, I'll turn it back.
Excellent. Yeah, that was great. Thanks, Noel. Excellent demo of that. And I think it really came through the completeness of this documentation set and how we've added to it. I mean, I think a great example is that endpoint controls document, right? So we've given you an optimized step-by-step approach to managing the endpoint controls down to picture screenshots that show you what buttons you need to push or, what it takes and what required from a compliance standpoint. So it really, really is helpful and demystifies some parts of this process that, there's some industry that want to create mystification around this. And I think we take the opposite approach. We're looking to try and make it understandable, make this a step-by-step process as much as possible so you can work your way through it, get the assistance you need, and get to the end goal.
Absolutely. That is our goal here, is to be as transparent as we can and to address all the changes that happen with CMMC. Stuff's going to change, stuff's going to be updated, and we're going to be right along with it so that your documentation will also stay updated too.
Exactly. We talked about sustainable compliance. You want someone to be with you throughout the process as things change, as the requirements change, as we learn more about how customers of ours are going through assessments and what feedback they're getting. Oh, we need more detail in this area. We need to change the way we approach this assessment objective. We'll be doing all of that actively and in real time. And we'll
Absolutely.
share that with you. And again, I mentioned it before. I want to reiterate, for those of you that wish to have, and at some point, everyone will need assistance because everyone will need a C3PO assessor. So we do have a bunch of assessors here, but it's more than that. As you can see, the assessor tab is what I pulled up here, but you've also got the MSP tab, managed service provider. You also have the RP tab, registered practitioners. There's almost 100 partners in PreVeil's community that we've worked with for years, that we know do an excellent job, that are familiar with the PreVeil system, familiar with our encryption model, familiar with our documentation that Noelle just went through, so that when you work with them, it's going to be faster, easier, more efficient. It's going to save you time. So you get access to that as a PreVeil customer. Extremely powerful as well. I just want to reiterate that PreVeil is ultimately a proven solution. As Noelle mentioned, we have C3POs that have gotten their CMMC certifications. We have 20 customers of ours, many different types of customers, from manufacturers to service providers, large and small, you name it. Here's just a few of them. But they've saved a ton of money by working with PreVeil to get to CMMC compliance. And I would argue a ton of time as well. We've had customers, very quickly, using our model to get to full CMMC compliance quickly. Just a couple, in case you're not already connected to PreVeil, you probably are, but just in case, from a sales perspective, you can always reach out to sales@preveil.com. And then for Noelle and her team, it's complianceinfo@preveil.com. So please make a note of those addresses. Feel free to follow up with us. We'll be responsive. We'll get back to you and we'll see how we can help you with your journey. And with that, we'll wrap up the prepared portion and go to the Q&A that we haven't already addressed. I saw Noelle was already quick on the trigger addressing some questions in writing. But let's get to Orly back again and we'll start that portion.
All right. So there have been a bunch of questions that have come in, but why don't we start off with the questions that were submitted first of all? Um, s- so one question that a lot of people have been asking is about how they can absorb the cost of CMMC certification. What's your perspective on that, Noelle?
So it's a great question, and it's been around pretty much since the beginning of CMMC. I remember when the CMMC program was brand new, that was a huge issue that all the contractors were like, how am I going to pay for this? Are you guys going to pay me directly? The DoD has said very clearly that they are not going to reimburse anybody for the cost. However, that is something that you can decide to bake into your cost on whatever contract. Perhaps it's a staff augmentation contract and you've got, 10 people and they're going to be at $50 an hour. Well, maybe you do the math and it would make more sense to have them at $52 an hour in order to recoup some of that loss. Or there's a multitude of different ways, but there is nothing direct that the DoD will do. But indirectly, you can absorb those costs through the contract if you so choose. But again, that's up to you.
Exactly. And I would say, first and foremost on that, figure out a way to get through this process by spending less, right? It will take time. And I know that alone is painful for many small, medium businesses, the time that you'll have to put into this. But when it comes down to the cost of the platform, your user licenses, what you're having to change, are you ripping and replacing your current systems for something else, et cetera? Really consider that, because I just want to be sure, PreVeil is one of the least expensive solutions out there. We're designed to be that way. So please make sure you're seriously considering that. That'll help make it easier to recoup that cost.
Definitely.
All right. Here's a last question I'll jump in on, and then we'll turn to some of the questions posed today. How firm are the timelines with respect to CFR 48? What is the latest there? I know you went over some of that, Vince, but what do we know?
I mean, what we're seeing is momentum in the marketplace from many primes and tier one contractors that want their supply base to be compliant with these requirements. It's very clear that this is moving forward. CMMC is the law now. The only thing that's out there a bit is exactly how it will be implemented, so that's parsing it at this stage. The new administration is clearly committed to the CMMC program based on the person who's been put in charge of the DoD from a CIO perspective. So this is happening. So now the question is simply, do you get started earlier or do you get started later? And if you get started later, the only thing I can tell you is it will get more expensive. Because if you get started later and you have to do things faster and you have to potentially outsource more or expedite or add resources, et cetera, it'll just be more expensive. So, what we counsel is protect your data. If you have data, it needs to be protected per the NIST 800 requirements that are already there today. So protect your data in a compliant platform like PreVeil. Update your SPRS score, and then start using a solution like PreVeil's Compliance Accelerator to start marching down the path of compliance at your pace, instead of the pace that's going to be stuck on you at some point when you've got an RFQ contract demand, or you find out you need to have it next month, because that can get very challenging and pricey.
All right. Thank you for that input. Wow. Okay. There are some long questions here that were sent in. All right. So
A short one, and then while we're here, when you can decipher larger ones.
Will everyone need a C3PAO assessor?
I'd say the vast majority of CUI access. If you have, let me put it this way. If you have a DFAR 7012 clause right now, I can almost completely guarantee you're going to have a CMMC assessment done with a C3PAO. There have been whispers that there are going to be certain types of CUI handlers that may not have to get a C3PAO assessment. That has not been there's nothing definitive on that. That has just been rumor at this point, as far as we can tell. I haven't seen anything definitive from the government on that. They've sort of talked about it here and there, but there's nothing definitive at this point. So at this point, again, barring any change from them, yes, anybody who has a DFAR 7012 clause right now, and anyone who will be handling CUI from a contract level perspective, is going to have to get a third-party assessment from a C3PAO.
I would agree with Noelle. I think at this point, you should assume that there's a possibility at some point you'll be able to get an exception for some period of time, et cetera. But based on what we're hearing, those are going to be very limited, very unique situations. So I wouldn't, unless you have prior knowledge that you're in line for one of those somehow, which it's always possible, I wouldn't expect that.
Yeah, and just to follow that too, the waiver process is I'm sorry. I'm hearing something from you, Orly.
Right.
Sorry. So
there was I'm in the office today, and there's a little bit loud.
No worries. So from a waiver, just to address that waiver, I'm glad you brought that up, Vince. So the waiver process was never defined before the final rule came out. It now is. And if you read through that, I read through it, it doesn't look very favorable. I'll just be very honest. It doesn't look like they're encouraging exceptions. So again, I completely agree with Vince. Err on the side of caution. Assume you're going to have to get an assessment, because if you're going to continue working in the DoD and even in the federal space, because now this is getting moved up to the federal space as well, as we know. So if you are going to stay in government service, you probably should just go ahead and get it addressed anyway.
Okay. Here's a question, and I apologize as it is pretty longly written. It says, we maintain very limited FCI used for exchanging of funds for our company to handle and repair tools for defense contractors. We are being required to operate within CMMC requirements. Since it is limited, would we be able to use PreVeil in order to fulfill this on a limited basis, or would this appear as evasive or lackluster to the requirements?
So if you're just trying to protect FCI, absolutely. I mean, we are great for FCI, CUI, ITAR, really any of those things. So yes, if that's the question, can PreVeil be used in in concert as part of, protecting FCI, you absolutely can. If you want to have a reduced number of users, what we call an enclave approach, where you have, let's say, 100 users, but only 10 of them need to access FCI, PreVeil is good for that too. I think I think I answered the question, but I also want to be sure that I didn't miss anything there. If I did, please feel free to put something in the Q&A, and I'll be happy.
Like Noelle, just to clarify, I believe for FCI, a defense contractor doesn't need to have a DFARS 7012 compliant platform, correct? So PreVeil facilitates it, can facilitate that, but from that perspective, we may have more horsepower than some people might need. Now, again, if you want to separate it, keep it with an enclave of users, great, would do that with PreVeil. But what we find is a lot of people with FCI are on a path to having CY, even if you don't have it today. So why not start now with something to protect your FCI and be that can evolve to protect CY? Otherwise, at some point, you're going to have to switch out all over again.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. That's a very good point. Yeah.
Just the last question, and I think we'll wrap up. There are a couple questions about the cost of a PreVeil package, and obviously that depends on the number of users. What can you say to that to kind of give some perspective to our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things is, first of all, we created a small business package with PreVeil. We actually call it PreVeil Pass. And the PreVeil Pass, it's kind of plays on like the Epic Pass. If you guys are skiers, the Epic or Icon passes out there, we have our PreVeil Pass. And the PreVeil Pass is fully inclusive. It includes small number of licenses, the compliance accelerator access to the LMS that Noelle went through, and our onboarding and training. And it's all in one. And that full package is less than $5,000 for the first year. So you can get in with all of those materials, everything that Noelle showed you, a DFARS compliant platform to store any CUI you have or might get, et cetera, for less than $5,000. So, I mean, I know $5,000 isn't nickel, it's more than nickels and dimes, but it's not an unreasonable cost to get you rolling with all of that content and get you really started down your path, knowing that it's a proven solution that can get you all the way to 110 out of 110. Now, if you're doing more licenses, we'll provide volume discounts on licenses over time. We'd be happy to discuss pricing with you. Please go to sales@preveil.com, or if you're already engaged with one of our account executives or one of our business development people, please request that information. We'd be happy to help you with a specific quote.
All righty. So for you, yes, and I'll just follow up. I'm noticing that there are a couple questions in the Q&A with people asking specific questions about costing for their particular organization. So to that, I will just request that you individuals, either send an email on our sales line. That's probably the best way for you to go forward.
Yep. You can, if you want to comfortable sending directly to me, my name's on the screen there. It's Petrecca, VPETRECCA @preveil.com. And that's PREVEIL.com. But feel free to send it directly to me, and I'll make sure it gets to the right people to get you that pricing information ASAP.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been once again a pleasure to do Coffee and Compliance. Coffee and Compliance. I keep on calling it that. All right, we are doing way too many webinars here. 10 steps to compliance. Coffee and Compliance is in 2 weeks. But thank you guys very much, and looking forward to doing this again next month.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Early. Thanks for joining us, everyone.